Good morning to you. The featured episode videos that you have the opportunity to see contain information that has been presented to the public for the first time nowhere and never in the world. Until now, there is no theory that could present the structure of matter and its interaction in a uniform and coherent manner. And yet this topic is bothering and engaging masses of physicists around the world. Physicists have already managed to do a lot. In Hadron Colliders they managed to break the atomic nucleus into parts. Some of their properties were known. But the end is what matter is still far away. It was also impossible to explain the mechanisms of interaction of matter, i.e., what is the force that binds the nucleus together. What are electrostatic forces, what is a magnetic field, or what is gravity and inertia? Despite the passage of about 100 years, progress in the field of physics is relatively slow. Although huge material resources have been committed, I am deeply convinced that it was Einstein who announced theoretical physics contained in the special relativity theory with his famous formula E equals mc squared. He made a mistake. The moment I changed my assumptions, everything started to fall into a coherent whole. My theory explains the phenomena not only in the nano world concerning the atom and its nucleus, but also phenomena occurring in the universe. The ignorance of the mechanism of matter formation or interactions between matter does not allow for an optimal solution to such problems as control of energy released during the decay of atomic nuclei or their synthesis, or the construction of magnetic and anti-gravity motors. I hope that after the announcement of my theory of light, the development of science, especially physics, will rapidly accelerate and problems related to ecology will quickly disappear. The new theory of light. The new theory of light is based largely on the laws of Newton and Maxwell. Einstein's theories are completely rejected as theoretical and unsupported by experience that would back them up. The new theory of light is based on the following principles. 1. Energy cannot exist without matter. 2. Mass can never turn into energy and vice versa. 3. Waves can only arise and propagate in the material environment. 4. Matter is permanently assigned an electric charge. 5. Light is the basis of the structure of the matter of the universe. Why did a new theory of light have to be created? This theory unequivocally provides answers to questions that modern science has not found any answers to. Here we will find an explanation of what matter is made of and under what conditions. It shows how the inertia of the force of gravity arises and also shows how the interactions between matter, strong, weak, electrostatic and magnetic interactions arise. It gives an explanation of other phenomena that are nowadays considered defects or singularities. An in-depth explanation of the processes of matter formation and their interactions will enable finding more ecological solutions for obtaining energy, which is of key importance nowadays. Knowing the mechanisms of matter and gravity formation, it will be easier to synthesize hydrogen atoms into helium or to use gravity to obtain energy. I am aware that my theory will be strongly resisted by the dominant lobby of Einstein's theories in the world of physics, especially since it is based on assumptions that are in clear contradiction to Einstein's theory. Returning to the details of explaining the new theory, we must refer to contemporary knowledge. The basis of the new theory of light, the abbreviation NTW will be used in further explanation, is the elementary particle, which is a photon. How are the properties of a photon currently determined? It is an elementary particle, has no electric charge or magnetic moment, has a zero rest mass μ equals 0, and a spin number s equal to 1. A photon is a carrier of electromagnetic interactions. It is a quantum of the energy of electromagnetic radiation, e.g. visible light. It has a wave-particle nature. For classical physics, a photon described in this way is a set of contradictions only, because it cannot be a particle and not have a rest mass, it cannot have neither an electric charge nor a magnetic moment, and at the same time be a carrier of such interactions. And finally, it cannot be a particle and then a wave. From the point of view of classical physics, this description seems strange, on the border of metaphysics, which assigns some miraculous, supernatural properties to the photon. And what did new research based on experience bring? The basic evidence for the wave structure of light, where the interference fringes when the light passed through the aperture. Meanwhile, it was experimentally found that when passing through the gap, both electrons and large groups of atoms behave similarly. Could they also be without a mass wave? Or maybe there is another explanation for this phenomenon, e.g. if all three types of matter, photon, electron and group of atoms, have additional vortex motion, and rubbing this matter against the edge of the aperture causes the flight path to deviate. Another example of the contradiction between the description of photon features so far and the experiment is the high-energy collision of two photons. As a result of such a collision, an electron and a positron are formed. The opposite phenomenon also takes place, i.e. photons from a positron and an electron can arise. How can a negative and positive electric charge be generated from non-electric photons? No answer currently. There are many more other cases of inconsistency of Einstein's physics with experience. I will not refer to them at the moment. Some of them will be presented while explaining the new theory, because my main goal is to present the elements of the new theory of light. In the new theory, the photon and its properties are the foundation upon which the whole theory rests. The following features have been attributed to the photons. 1. It is a material particle and has mass and shape. 2. It has a positive and negative electric charge permanently bound to the photon. 3. As a photon, it is capable of rectilinear, uniform motion. It has the speed of light with simultaneous rotational, uniform motion. 4. It moves freely in space. It can collide with other photons or matter. 5. It is the smallest elementary particle discovered so far, which can divide into half with sufficiently high collision energy. The photon described in this way is the basic molecule in the NTW from which matter is formed. For further descriptions, the symbolic shape of the photon was adopted and marked in yellow and marked with plus and minus signs, electric charges, to show the different energy potential of photons. Colored fringes were introduced and thus, high-energy photons, blue color medium-energy photons, green color low-energy photons, red color. We know from experience that such photons rush from a light source at an enormous speed, known as the speed of light and marked with the letter C. Movement of photons described in this way. Let's see in the animation. Here we see that both the blue, green and red photons have the same velocity. The spin speed of these photons is differentiated. It also means that they have different energies. In the principles of Newtonian physics, we can easily find formulas describing such a state of matter. The total energy of such a photon can be expressed by the formula EC equals 1/2 mc2 plus 1/2 I omega 2, where EC, total energy of the photon, m, mass of the photon, c, speed of light, I, moment of inertia about the axis trading, omega, angular velocity of the photon spin. If we assume that the mass of the photon is a constant quantity and the speed of light c is also a constant quantity, then the energy of the photon related only to translation motion is also a constant quantity, i.e. 1/2 mc2 equals const. Hence, the variability of the photon energy depends only on the speed of the vortex motion, i.e. on the term 1/2 I omega 2. According to Maxwell's theory, a photon with an electric charge rushing at the speed of light and spinning at high speed becomes the source of an electromagnetic wave whose we can measure parameters. We can therefore say that a photon as a material particle is the source of the wave, and not, as Einstein's followers teach, a photon turns into a wave. No material object can turn into a wave. Why this wave can travel in space will be explained in the following NTW descriptions. Now consider what happens to photons having the same energy, traveling in a similar direction, and whose flight paths intersect at a small angle. Let's see a simulation of such a situation in the animation. We see that both photons come closer to each other, and at some point, thanks to electrostatic forces, both photons have electric charges. They will combine and a new matter molecule will be formed, which is called a neutrino. Neutrinos can also be formed by nuclear transformations. A characteristic feature of such a molecule is its electrical neutrality for external objects. Minimal interaction with matter and its very small dimensions allow this molecule to penetrate even objects such as the Earth or even stars. The figure also shows other possibilities for the formation of neutrinos. If the energy of both photons is equal, the path of the resulting neutrino will be the result of the path of the photons before the merger, and the speed will remain the same as the photons, i.e., the speed of light will be preserved. The situation will be slightly different when the energy of the connecting photons is different, due to different spin speeds. According to the laws of Newton's dynamics, a photon with a higher energy will transfer some of the energy to the other photons. After merging, the spin speed will change, and the speed of the neutrino formed in these conditions will increase. Increasing speed means exceeding the speed of light. In research during the experiment, the group of scientists from the European Centre for Nuclear Research, CERN, in Geneva, and the Gran Sasso Laboratory in Italy involved in the OPERA experiment announced that the velocity of elementary particles called neutrinos they measured was greater than the velocity of light. This discovery calls into question one of the most important foundations of modern physics, the theory of relativity, which states that nothing can move faster than light. Quote from a press release. The neutrino particles will be of different mass depending on the number of photons making up them. Now let's look at the situation where the photons come from two different light sources and the flight paths intersect on the straight line connecting the two sources. In such a situation, the two photons must collide. Depending on the energy of the photons, the collisions will have different effects. 1. Photons are high energy. As a result of such a collision, double halves of photons will be created, having the same electric charges. The double halves are the nuclei of the positron and the electron. Such an event is shown in the animation. 2. One of the photons is high energy, and the other is low energy. The collision of such photons will break only the high energy photon into half, while the low-energy photon will lose some energy and cease to function as a photon. What will its functions be? In the description below. Also in the further part of the description. There will be explanations of the function performed by individual halves of a photon. Such a collision is presented in the animation. 3. Photons are low and or medium energetic and photon collision with any matter, except reflections. Collisions of this type lead to total or partial loss of energy by the photon and they cease to function as a photon, which is also shown in the animation. A photon that has lost its energy partially or completely in the further parts of the NTW explanations will be called a photonus and will be labeled similarly to a photon but filled with gray. Photonus properties of a photon has a lower energy than a photon. It can also have energy equal to 0, has a mass equal to a photon and it interacts with an electrostatic force with other matter that has an electric potential. It plays a very important role in the formation of matter and in the interactions between matter. Thus, it has a completely different task than the photon, whose task is to transfer mass and energy in space. Since the subject of the new theory of light is very extensive, I will finish its presentation today in the description of the photonus. In the second episode, I will present how and under what conditions matter is formed, and I will provide information about two completely new particles, so far unknown, that also participate in the structure of matter. Thank you for your attention.